The following is produced by 5 Star Productions USA, which is solely responsible for its editorial content and is sponsored in part by a grant from Paul Mitchell Salon Hair Care.
There's nothing new about water pollution. The Roman Empire let leaching from the pipes and water goblets poison the water supply. What's new, however, are the causes of our water pollution: acid rain, toxic waste, and many other ecological villains created by modern society often turn our precious water into poison. Hi, I'm Ed Begley Jr., and this is today's Environment, coming from Epcot at the Walt Disney World Resort. What are some of the new ways people are finding to solve the problems that face our modern world? Let's take a closer look. An unavoidable ritual of childhood is hearing your parents request, mostly in vain, that you clean up after yourself. But you're about to meet a company that's taken those words to heart and found in the process that you can indeed do well by doing good.
In corporate life, as in human endeavors, there are those who lead and those who don't. When it comes to protecting the environment, some companies are constantly out front, while others are typically in arrears. Many industries complain that environmental programs are cost prohibitive and too hard to implement, despite a large body of evidence to the contrary. Those naysayers could well benefit from a refresher course in the 3 R's: reduction, recovery, and recycling. Because as more and more companies around the country are discovering, pollution prevention isn't just an exercise in corporate citizenship. Being green can earn you gold. For example, at Berko Manufacturing Corporation, a lot of effort is devoted to eliminating waste at its source, either through advanced new technology or by regularly soliciting ideas from employees that would improve manufacturing procedures, such as switching from a wet paint to a far more efficient and environmentally friendly powder coat painting system. This one move wiped out more than 250 tons of air pollution. But given the nature of the end product, certain materials that could potentially harm the environment still have to be used. These are recovered and, when possible, recycled. For instance, hazardous metals that build up during the electroplating process are removed from the wastewater as sludge, dried, and then shipped off for reclamation. The water is treated and reused. Used hydraulic oil from the plant's machinery is routinely cleaned, filtered, and recycled. That equals thousands of gallons of oil that don't have to be purchased and drastically lowers the cost of disposal. And what of those materials that can't be recovered? A key to this, or any other waste management program for that matter, is to be constantly on the alert for recycling and waste reduction opportunities. Each year, for example, Berko recycles a small forest's worth of cardboard and enough scrap steel to make 3,700 Volkswagen Beetles. Add to that foam rubber, plastics, office paper, tires, batteries, water and wood scraps, and a list of new candidates that's continually growing. In this case, virtue is not its own reward. Some companies are making hundreds of thousands of dollars through finding new uses and markets for their waste products, and saving enormous amounts by avoiding the high costs of waste treatment and disposal, not to mention fines and lawsuits from non-compliance. Experience has shown that waste reduction programs work best when management is truly committed and employee input is actively sought. In corporate life, as in human endeavors, change is never easy. But if there's ever going to be genuine progress, you've got to take that all-important first step.
A plastic six-pack ring can be a hangman's noose for marine animals. So snip your rings and save a seal. Get involved with today's environment today.
Behind every successful team or system is an essential component. You want to score touchdowns, you keep the quarterback healthy. Want to keep our nation's drinking water safe and clean now and for the future? The best way is to protect it at the source. If you live in rural America, you especially can't afford to pass this next segment up.
At one time or another, most of us have indulged in this particular form of wishful thinking. After all, it only costs a penny or two, and who knows, your fondest dreams just might come true. But when our groundwater becomes polluted, the possible consequences to public health and local economies just can't be wished away. Groundwater makes up half of our nation's water supply, and our small towns and rural areas rely on groundwater for 95% of their water. They're especially vulnerable. 94% of all water systems serve populations of less than 10,000. For them, the water pipeline is their lifeline, ensuring their quality of life. Should the worst happen, should the groundwater supply become contaminated, there are a number of remedies available. New treatment facilities can be built, or new water sources can be found and developed. But these are expensive propositions. If many of our large cities can barely afford them, then the economies of scale may rule out these alternatives for rural areas and small communities. The answer may lie instead in the words of that familiar old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. For the only true way of guaranteeing a safe water supply for the future is to protect the source. A number of government agencies and nonprofit organizations are working with small water systems in rural communities to prevent problems before they can ever start. Among them is the National Rural Water Association. This organization is the largest utility organization in the country, providing free training and on-site technical assistance to water systems through their state affiliates. The NRWA EPA Wellhead Protection Program began in 14 states and quickly expanded to 26. The National Rural Water Association dispatches groundwater technicians to rural and small community water systems throughout the country to provide on-site assistance in the implementation of a 5-step plan to protect groundwater supplies. Step 1 consists of choosing a planning team from different segments of the community. They then gather as much information about the nature of their water source to identify the area they need to protect. Step 3, the team identifies potential sources of contamination. Once the risks to the community have been identified, a plan for managing the protection area must be developed. And finally, team members devise a plan for the future that's designed to safeguard the health and financial well-being of the community and identifying contingencies for any number of crises that might threaten their water supply. This groundwater protection program is only one of a broad grassroots effort to preserve the quality of life in rural and small-town America by protecting our natural resources now and for future generations. But the lesson is the same throughout. One small ounce of protection today, one huge weight off the shoulders of rural America tomorrow. In a moment, on today's Environment, pulp and paper black liquor, we have the solution, plus the latest oil spill response teams, next.
Cellular phones, satellite dishes, and other advanced electronic products usually fall in price as they rise in popularity. But what about the environmental cost of these impressive innovations? That may be coming down too, and here's why.
Given the current pace of technological change, it sometimes seems as if what was inconceivable only this morning and indispensable by noon is inconsequential by sundown. While the products spawned by the technological revolution have brought new levels of efficiency and convenience for many consumers, the progress on the environmental front hasn't always been as encouraging. This in turn has caused a second, quieter revolution as more and more manufacturers are examining their operations in detail in an effort to make them cleaner and safer. Altruism and public spiritedness may play a role in this decision, but companies spearheading this movement have also made the happy discovery that it quite often makes excellent business sense in terms of improved product quality and reliability and heightened customer satisfaction. One such company is Sheldall, manufacturer of, among other things, the flexible printed circuits that are used in many of today's most complex electronic systems. In the production of these circuits, a plastic film must be attached to a copper foil. When the solvent in the adhesive primarily used for this purpose was named a suspected carcinogen by the EPA, the company was able to replace it with flammable solvents that produced far fewer emissions. Customers testing the new materials reported them to be as good as or superior to the original. Now that development is being taken one step further with the introduction of a material, NovaClad, that requires no adhesive and therefore no solvents at all in its manufacture. Opportunities were also found to reduce by 40% the amount of water used in the manufacturing process that normally consumes 150,000 gallons a day. In addition, wastewater is routinely treated and even reused when possible, and residual metals are sent off-site for recovery. Sheldal recently took all that it had learned since 1987 and put it into the design of a pilot plant for large-scale flexible circuit manufacture. In this case, there's no connection to the municipal water system. The processed water is in a closed-loop system, and the copper used in the process can also be recovered on-site. All of this adds up to a rewarding experience for those manufacturing companies who know that technology may come and go, but a clean environment can never become obsolete.
If fish could talk, they'd be mad as hell. Every year, 14 billion tons of trash get dumped in the ocean. Bring litter back to the dock and recycle it. Get involved with today's environment today.
There's an oil slick in your waterway. Who are you going to call? Okay, so maybe no one's made a movie called Spillbusters, but there is a real-life counterpart, and they're quite an impressive team. Let's meet them now.
As long as oil is moved over water, there is the danger that oil and water will go on meeting like this. In the wake of the Alaskan oil spill in 1989, the largest spill in U.S. history, several leading oil companies investigated the number of existing resources to respond to a catastrophic spill. Their findings? Nowhere, neither in government nor industry, was there a capability to respond adequately to a spill the size of the Valdez, the spill that prompted the passage of the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. It requires owners and operators of vessels and facilities involved in oil production, transportation, and storage to contract the private personnel and equipment needed to combat any major spills they might cause.
The industry eventually helped form and fund an independent not-for-profit organization specifically designed to contain and clean up spills, the Marine Spill Response Corporation.
They're not the country's only spill responders, but MSRC is unique in a number of ways. With 5 regional response centers and more than 20 equipment storage sites, it is the only spill fighting company operating on all 3 coasts of the United States. They're designed to begin a response to a major spill within 2 hours of being called out, whether it's offshore or in tidal waters, including bays, harbors, and the mouths of some rivers. The organization's one and only task is to help combat spills. To do so, it has at its command more than $400 million worth of equipment, ranging from a fleet of oil spill response vessels, large barges for temporarily receiving and storing recovered oil, and smaller barges for setting up cleanup equipment like booms and portable skimmers. They also boast an advanced network of mobile, stationary, and shipboard communications. With the threat of a large spill always present, it's important that responders share information and ideas whenever possible. MSRC has conducted joint training exercises and cooperated on research and development projects. Some of the more promising new techniques under study are aerial applications of oil-breaking dispersants, controlled burning, and remote sensing, an airborne system that can determine the direction and thickness of an oil slick, even in the dead of night. So does that mean that the days of scenes like this are numbered? Well, not yet. Even with the best technology, industry can only clean 10 to 20% of the oil spilled in most major accidents. The answer lies in prevention rather than treatment.
But until then, the best defense may be for spillers or the government to call on this seagoing cavalry when oil hits the water.
Next on Today's Environment, another innovation that helps preserve our vanishing landfill space, and learn about NovaClad and why it's planet-friendly, coming up.
Remember the old story of the princess who was given the seemingly impossible task of spinning straw into gold? Well, in our next segment, we'll meet a real-life group of people who've accomplished something almost as impressive. They transform waste materials into usable products in an extraordinarily clean way.
To bury or to burn. If you were looking to dispose of waste materials, those used to be your only real choices, and each had some serious drawbacks. Landfill space is disappearing at an alarming rate. It's expensive, and there's the risk of greenhouse gases and groundwater contamination. Incinerators can dispose of the waste all right, but are not considered by some to be environmentally friendly. But now there may finally be some light at the end of the tunnel. Like landfills and incinerators, this device called a steam reformer will get rid of the waste, but unlike its counterparts, it does so very cleanly and safely in a wide variety of applications. For example, this pulse-enhanced steam reformer, marketed by Thermochem Incorporated, is tackling one of the toughest applications, black liquor recovery in the pulp and paper industry. During the paper-making process, resins must be removed from the wood by dissolving with caustic chemicals. The resulting byproduct, a brew called black liquor, is currently burned in large boilers to recover chemicals and energy. This can create odor and air emissions and is subject to violent explosions. The steam reformer is a different animal altogether. It's heated by a modified rocket motor called a pulse combustor, and because the low temperature heat is applied indirectly, the risk of explosion is virtually eliminated. Here, in simplified form, is what takes place inside the reaction vessel. The pulse combustor heats a steam fluidized bed in an oxygen-free environment. Upon being introduced to the steam, the waste materials are dried, pyrolyzed, and reacted with the steam. The pulping chemicals, now called green liquor, are recovered for recycling. And here's the best part of all. The end product of Thermochem's steam reforming process is a valuable hydrogen-rich, clean-burning gas that can be burned as fuel by the end user, used for power generation or made into environmentally friendly alternative fuels. This new technology has been funded initially by the Department of Energy's Small Business Innovative Research Program. It's been tested successfully in the coal, sewage sludge, municipal solid waste, and other biomass treatment markets.
For the 21st century, burning and burying will be replaced by more sustainable approaches. The steam reformer has extraordinary opportunities, both domestically and internationally.
Transforming wastes into usable products. It almost sounds like the handiwork of an alchemist or a magician. And if the clean reformer does turn out to be the answer, it will have accomplished something magical indeed. It will make the dilemma of whether to bury or to burn disappear for good.
If you're like me, you've been recycling your aluminum containers for years. But did you know that recycling aluminum causes a waste problem even as it's solving another one? We're tempted to call this next segment Recycling the Next Generation.
A cynical bit of folk wisdom states that no good deed goes unpunished. While that may not always be the case in human affairs, when it comes to recycling aluminum, it's all too often true. The unavoidable fact is that the recycling process itself generates a huge amount of waste. When aluminum is melted down, it creates a byproduct called dross, or salt cake, which contains a small amount of the metal plus aluminum oxide and the salts used in the smelting process. Traditionally, this waste material is skimmed off and disposed of at landfills. With at least 2 billion pounds dumped each year, no one is predicting a dross shortage anytime soon, but landfill space is becoming more and more scarce. And just because depositors pass today's safety standards doesn't mean they won't be held legally and financially accountable should the site be contaminated in the future. That leaves the aluminum industry with the choice of continuing to risk liability, closing down their smelters, or finding a superior solution to landfilling. This may look more like an eyesore than a solution, but if you've ever doubted that one person's trash is another's treasure, consider the following. People have been toying with the idea of reusing the aluminum in dross and salt cake for years. The problem's always been that the processing costs have always been much higher than the value of the metal. But now, a company called Aluminum Waste Technology has come up with a way to recover and sell not just the metal, but every component in the dross. The resulting products are of equal or better quality than the original and sell at a much lower price. When the process is done, the aluminum and the salts are sold back to the processors. Particles of metal are extracted from the aluminum oxide and are used in the production of steel, while the rest is used in the manufacture of ceramic fibers, insulation, and abrasive compounds. Aluminum Waste Technology believes that reusing raw materials this way helps preserve our vanishing landfill space and reduces the need for additional mining to provide the prime metal. It gives the aluminum industry a chance to solve their waste disposal problems in a manner that's economically viable and environmentally sound. And for many firms, it opens up any number of promising new applications and markets. Beautiful, they're not. But for the right prospector, there's plenty of gold in them thar hills.
Most of us know what megawatts are, but there's another source of energy you can generate. It's called the negawatt. And every time you conserve electricity, that's what you're generating. One utility found that by promoting negawatts, their customers could conserve the electricity generated by 5 electrical plants. Just imagine the savings in emissions. Here in Epcot at the Walt Disney World Resort, energy conservation and pollution reduction play a major role in everyday operations. The spaceship Earth that we all share is a living organism, and I hope this show stressed the importance of keeping it healthy. Join us again next time as we explore more environmental solutions on today's environment.
Epcot 95 is located at the Walt Disney World Resort near Orlando, Florida. Accommodations provided by the Buena Vista Palace, Walt Disney World Village. The preceding program was sponsored in part by a grant from Paul Mitchell Salon Hair Care. This has been a presentation of 5 Star Productions USA.